Welcome to the Site Visit podcast. Leadership in construction with perspective from the job site. With your hosts, Andrew Hansen, James Faulkner, and Christian Ham.
From the Site Mag studio in Yaletown, Vancouver.
Let's get down to it.
Today, it's a beautiful, sunny Thursday afternoon.
Spring.
Early spring afternoon. But you wouldn't know otherwise if you went outside. But Brandon, thanks for joining us. It's great
to be here.
Yeah, no, and Andrew, here you go. Tee it up.
This is a special one. We're all video, we're all live. We've been chasing Brandon for about a year, and as they all say, the good ones take time to bring in. But I think Brandon and I have been kind of sending emails back and forth about a year, which is great news because it means Novacom is busy. But we're excited to have you and excited to have you on the show and learn more about your story, learn more about Novacom. And I think when I was talking with James and Christian, timing's great because I know you'll get into your story about how you guys specialize both, in interior, retail environments, etc. Big item of conversation and topic lately. So without further ado, welcome to the show. And I guess we sent you some questions before, but first one really is, who is Brandon? And I know for you, we talked offline, it does connect with a bit of the story of the company. So let's get to it.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, guys. Glad that we could finally make this happen.
Yeah.
So a bit about me. Born in Edmonton. Don't hold it against me. Moved to Vancouver about 4 or 5, somewhere in there. So grew up right here. I've got a younger sister, Sherelle, who's also a partner in the business with me, and I'll talk a bit about that later. But yeah, on the professional side, kind of growing up in the family business, thinking way back, Dad had me on job sites from a really young age. I remember cleaning up job sites probably at 5 or 6. He started out as a painting contractor, and then when we moved to BC, started getting into home building. So there's a lot of weekends in a foundation cleaning up lumber and burning lumber and cleaning up the site. So good memories there. He moved into commercial construction in 91 when he started Novacom after kind of the downturn in the residential market. So true family business upbringing. Dad the entrepreneur, mom the controller. And lots of our dinner table conversations were around where the next project was coming from and, how we're going to keep busy. So I started to get exposed to the business by getting to work on some sites as a laborer on the weekends, moving dirt, doing demo, a lot of weekends and evenings doing demolition on banks and knocking out ceramic tile and bank lobbies, which was always good times. Pressure washing, whatever you can think of, any messy job, I was doing it. So I probably around 13 or so was also given the chance to work in the office and really enjoyed that. Different days than it is now. We were faxing out bid invitations. I had the fax machine with the presets of what our top 48 trades and pressing those buttons and remembering what order and rolling up full drawing sets for people to bid on jobs. On the office side, I built our first CRM, so really started to get into the technology side and the system side. I found that I really loved that side of the business and tried to find some more efficient ways to do things. So that continued kind of all the way through high school and as I grew up there. I think probably the point that was a bit of a turning point, there's a couple of turning points, I guess. First one was at the end of high school, I didn't really have a sense of what I wanted to be yet. Didn't have university lined up, was thinking about doing some traveling and stuff. And last day of grade 12, my dad said, you got any plans for the summer? Do you want to do something? I said, sure. I don't have any other plans, so might as well. And I got to run a few small projects. I did that for a couple of years and did a bit of traveling, went to Australia and backpacking and stuff. And it was about age 20 where I was like, you know what, I think this is what I want to do for a career. Getting attached to the family business, I guess, and the opportunity it presents and the things that I loved about it made me feel like that was the right way to go. So At that, Dad's kind of said at that point, he said, you know what, I learned through the school of hard knocks, so you're going to have to go to school if you want to do this. So went back to BCIT and did ABET program, which was awesome and intense. Felt like 4 years of school crammed into 2, which I guess is what it is. But
What it is.
and then started at Novacom in 2004 as a project manager. So we were real small back then. My dad was the wearing all hats entrepreneurial guy. So he was the president, project manager, estimator, business development, you name it, he was doing. So we kind of lined up a plan, like a 10-year plan for Dad to plan to retire, and started to work alongside each other. And remember, it felt like a huge risk at the time. My 45K salary or something felt like it was really going to stretch the company. We didn't know how we were going to make it work. But the first year, I think we doubled in size, and then it continued to kind of scale from there. I started to get even more into the tech side of things, kind of looked at all the things we were doing and started to think about whether they would scale with us. So the way we were doing a lot of things was like, very organized. My dad's always been a very structured, organized guy, and taught me, how to build my site binders back in the day with the perfect tabs and all that stuff. So I think that's pretty woven into who I am. But some of our systems, weren't really built to scale. So we implemented an ERP and servers and other systems and stuff to kind of set us up to grow. So we had about 6-7 years of pretty steady growth there. Until probably 2011, 2012, I kind of got to another turning point in my career. I'd say like at that point, I was doing way too many projects. I was probably managing 10, 11 projects at the same time as a PM, and kind of got to that burnout place. But I think more than the workload, it was seeing the part of the industry that was just really adversarial and really conflict driven. And I had one project, I won't mention the project, but one that was kind of the one that almost broke the back, where it was just a battle. It was that one where every site meeting is just, you wake up in the morning and you're like, I don't really want to go to work today. Yeah. And so I had to really, really fight through that one. And had an experience, I remember one day actually after that, sitting at the top of Grouse Mountain and having some perspective on, the fact that my problems that felt pretty big weren't actually the end of the world, and, had enough to kind of carry on. And then in about 2013, we had a client experience that just completely changed my perspective. It was probably the first time in a significant way that I felt a client really saw us as a partner, in the way that they empowered us to make decisions. They trusted us. It was actually a really unfortunate situation at the time, but the project manager we were dealing with had a sister in Ontario who was ill, and so she was she had to be pretty absent through most of the project, and so we had to rise up and do our best for her. But the whole dynamic was one where she just trusted us, and I think that was partly driven by leadership at the time of how they did things. Is that they didn't see their construction manager as just a GC or just someone who would get the work done. They really saw them as kind of an extension of them. So that was definitely a turning point moment where I think I really started to understand the impact of partnership and what that meant. As I was in my crossroads time, I think I decided that I really loved our team. We had just, a great team of people that I got to work alongside. There's a lot of things about what I did that I just loved. And so I wanted to kind of keep going and see where we could take this thing. So around 2014, transition to the president role. My dad sort of started to step back into partial retirement then. And I had this sense at the time that I really wanted to lead alongside a team, to not be kind of the solo leader, but to be doing it with a group of people that were really aligned and on the same page. And I also at that time, I think I didn't really have a lot of clarity around what sort of what made us unique and what our mission was. When you have that question of the elevator pitch of like, well, what do you guys do? It's like, wow, we build banks and restaurants, and it wasn't so much the why, it was more the what. And so that kind of sent us down an interesting path. We formed a leadership team that year, actually in 2015, and it was myself. My sister had joined the business by then. She started out as a teacher, and then kind of came back into the family business a few years in. And so she's our director of people and culture, and just love leading alongside her. And then a couple of guys that had been with us for probably 8 or so years at the time. Matthew Groot as now director of project management, and Paul Stapleton as business development, and then Josh, our controller. And so together, and my dad, Wes, was still on our leadership team at the time. And so we're really kind of charting a course of like, who is Novacom and why do we do what we do? What's our reason for being? We've all probably seen Simon Sinek's TED Talk start with why, but that was the one that really sparked a lot of questions. We watched it at our AGM that year, and it brought all kinds of interesting stuff up for all of us. And it was actually interesting because it wasn't the same why for all of us, in the sense of we each had different things about, construction and about what we got to do that we loved and that we were passionate about. So, we worked with a marketing branding group at the time, and they helped us kind of get to the place of Novacom Building Partners, which was really an emphasis on partnership. The same thing I was just talking about is where we felt like, hey, if we felt like this when we had a client who treated us like a partner, obviously our trade partners are going to feel the same way, right? If we trust them, if we align with them, if we empower them, then they're going to do their best work, right? Mm-hmm. And so that was one of the big pieces that came out of it. And the transforming construction piece, which we'll talk about in a bit, which feels like a pretty bold statement at face value and has a bit of deeper meaning behind it. That came out of that as well. And when they showed it to us, I remember it was just like, yep, that's it. And it just felt very much aligned with kind of where we were at and what our passion was. So I think that journey really kind of put me and put us as a leadership team into a place of feeling fired up and passionate about where we were going. And since then, it's really been a lot about growth. I think our philosophy as a company and mine personally has been about growing people, and about finding people who have the values and characteristics and qualities that you want on your team, and then building them and building the experience piece. So it's been a fun ride these last 5 years. A few speed bumps along the way. Last year's was an interesting one, but a lot of growth in not just the type of projects for sure, which there has been a lot of growth there, but just seeing the growth in the people on the team, on our leadership team, on people who have come up with the company, has been for sure the most rewarding part of my job. I can tell you a story about that when we talk about transforming construction, what that means to us. But so yeah, it's cool. It's a cool time right now because it feels like we're really starting to see some of those seeds that have been planted starting to grow and turn into some real things. And actually this year is our 30th anniversary, which is kind of crazy to think about. So
Nice,
looking forward to celebrating that this fall. So yeah, it's an exciting time.
So Brandon, what's the you taking this over from your dad, or the succession plan? What was did he ever tell you the story of the name of Novacom, why it's called Novacom?
Novacom's actually it's not super fancy. It's just Nova for new and Com for commercial. So it's like new commercial construction.
Got it.
So
Okay. Well, there you go. There's the reason.
There you go. Yeah.
Nice. Cool.
Congrats on 30 years. That's pretty amazing. And for you guys listening on just audio, as Brandon told his story, he was smiling almost the whole time. So you can tune in for the video for that. But for those listening, can you give a quick snapshot? Who is kind of Novacom today, present tense? Whether it's, we talk about your sales pitch, we're going to dive into transforming construction, but sector, focus, company size, company projects, just for our listeners to set the tone.
Yeah. So, I mean, what we do, obviously we're construction managers. So interchangeable, I guess, with general contracting, but I think we're really focused on acting as a CM and as an extension of our clients. We've got about 40 people at the moment, about half in the office and half in the field. Our three kind of key business areas are tenant improvements, new construction, and building envelope. Tenant improvements really was kind of the foundation of Novacom, like how my dad built the business and where we've been strongest in. That started out with the banks. The financial clients have been kind of our foundational clients from day one. All five of the big banks. So that's been an interesting ride. A lot of fast track schedules and night shift renovations and stuff like that. But I think what it taught us is how to be really organized and how to deliver on really aggressive schedules. There was never we're moving the date by a week, right? It was, this is happening regardless. So I think that's always been our mindset of how to deliver really aggressive schedules. In the last 5 years, that's grown into some pretty significant TI projects on the larger side of tenant improvements. SAP was one of them. The Vancouver office was a large project for us back in 2015. And Equinox in Vancouver was in 2016, 2017. And then KPU, Civic Plaza, KPU's new campus in Surrey was a big one a couple of years ago. So, I've been able to grow that side of the business and be on some pretty cool, technical, fun, large TI projects. And so, feels like a real privilege to kind of be in the group, pretty small group of Vancouver CMs who are sort of in that playground. So, on the new construction side, really been growing that steadily. That really started with McDonald's. Started working for McDonald's in 2014. We've done about 10 new builds across Western Canada. Those are crazy schedules as well. Those are like dirt to open restaurant in 14 weeks.
Yeah.
So sometimes we tell people that and they're like, that's not a real thing, but no, that's what it actually is. Actually, the one in Richmond, number 3 Road, was a fun one because that was the first McDonald's in Canada that we did a couple of years ago, and so there's all kinds of history there, and the golden arches had to be preserved and all that stuff. So I think we saw that was an area that more and more people on our team were passionate about growing into new construction, and so we recruited Cal as our director of field ops 4 years ago. He came from Chandos in Alberta and brought that experience on really large new construction projects and has been incredible at mentoring our field team and bringing that, not just the technical experience, but I think even more than that, the wisdom and the coaching and we were just breaking down his role the other day, and one of the biggest slices of the pie was dad talks. So we're thinking there's a pretty big element of that in his role. So it's been cool to see that side growing. A few of our recent ones, we did a Cloverdale Fieldhouse just close by here, at Cloverdale Athletic Park. SIFA Langley is just wrapping up right now, which is a 2-story with a rooftop playground daycare here in Langley. And we're in the works on a design build social housing project in Vancouver. So cool to see that side growing, something that we're super passionate about, and some exciting opportunities ahead. And then building envelope is projects mostly for BC Housing and in the social housing space, but building envelope upgrades, energy upgrades, things like that. So that's kind of the big buckets, I guess, or the business units. Some of the core markets, financial, I mentioned, has been a huge one. It's definitely changing to that question of, how is the world changing and the market changing? Not as many new banks being built these days as there were 5-6 years ago. Restaurants, interesting times for restaurants as well, but lots of change and transition there. Fast food, and then also on the the higher end with Earls and Cactus and a few of those types of clients. Corporate offices, also an interesting time. We'll get to that, but social housing, childcare, post-secondary education, civic sort of government projects, rec centers and things like that, and then starting to get into some residential and mixed-use projects. So that's kind of a bit of a snapshot of what we do.
Do you
I
find
didn't realize I'd spend so much time in some of your fine establishments.
Yeah, exactly.
McDonald's.
McDonald's.
Yeah, I can attest to the build time because there's one, I think you guys did I don't know if it was a new build or a reno, but there's one on Langley 200th Street. And I used to drive that one, and I drive past it and I almost rear-ended somebody because I looked over and I was like, I swear I drove past this a week ago and they're done. Or 2 weeks ago.
That was our first McDonald's project. And let me tell you, if you want to be a hero to your kids or to your nieces and nephews, just build McDonald's projects. And that's all they care about. They just think you're, magic.
You've got to the finish line. What are you doing? Like, you're already there.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but in all seriousness, it's pretty impressive work. They go up so fast, and I can say I've been in a few of them. They look great. So.
Yeah, it's been fun. They've got a really, really dialed in system too, but also a very partnership minded client, we could tell from the very beginning they were about building long-term relationships, and they have, GCs that have been working with them for 30 plus years, and there's a reason for that. So
Yeah, and I think, and we'll maybe dive into the transforming construction story, but I think the clients you listed, the sectors you identified that are your buckets you guys operate, you guys start to gravitate a little bit to that environment where clients really value the service you guys bring. There's a trusted, when you're doing retail, food and beverage, education, like you really got to trust your building partner, because that end product, it's time sensitive, and there's a lot of different formalities. So yeah, maybe just expand on the transforming construction, and that's going to open up a lot of conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. So like I said, on the face of it, feels like a pretty bold statement. I think some people, not the intention, but may interpret it that we think we're transforming construction. That's not, we're not, certainly not doing it single-handedly, but I think what that meant, and I'll say just our mission here, is to transform the construction experience and be transformed in the process. So for us, it really had a dual meaning. And that's the part that really resonated. So the first part was just, we want to change the way people think about construction and the way people experience construction. So if, the typical way people think about it is that, it's painful, they're going to get ripped off. Project is almost like an obstacle to get to the end thing, that you can totally flip that around and think of it as something that actually is going to be fun and enjoyable along the way. And that's been a game changer for us to think of it that way, and to try and deliver that kind of experience to our clients. And then the other side of it is just the fact that we're constantly transforming as people and learning and growing along the way. So, if I look back at myself 15, 16 years ago, whenever, I started full-time with Novacom, like, I'm a pretty different person than I was 16 years ago. And I think it was a realization that actually the work we do is actually growing us as people, and not even just as people, in our roles, but as people in general. Right. So the skills we learn along the way make us better, partners, parents, friends. And I've seen that, in tons of people on our team, of just seeing this massive amount of growth. And then that's really become a core part of our mission of creating the kind of environment where people can grow like that on our team. So there's just to expand on that a little bit more, we landed on like 4 pillars around the transforming construction that really kind of framed it for us. And we come back to these multiple times a year, actually every year at our AGM, and then every quarterly meeting, to talk about, like, what are we doing in each of these areas to live this out. So the first one was transforming spaces. So the fact that we get to build stuff is just pretty rewarding and fulfilling. I mean, not everyone gets that in their work. So the fact that you can see something go from nothing to a building, or an old space to a new space, is the kind of tangible reward in construction that's just part of the best part of the job. The people side, as I was just saying, like, yeah, just getting to see people grow as people, and creating an environment where people grow. Also where people feel cared for as people, beyond what they can produce, has been a real big focus of, creating a structure where, we don't have 30 people reporting to one person. We have a pretty small ratio, because we want to have that intimate relationship with people and know what's going on in their life and how their families are doing and their kids are doing, and what they're struggling with. And I think that's been a huge piece of that. The perceptions piece, transforming perceptions, is a lot about, kind of what I was saying about changing the way you think about construction. So for me, that's, the technology piece, just innovation. There's just so many ways where our industry, I think it's changing now, but has been a bit stuck in the old way of doing things. And that's always been kind of the opposite of the way I think. It's always about how can we do this better? And then the experience thing about, if there's all of the reasons why sometimes construction gets a bad rap, they're justified because someone had that experience, right? Whether it was people ripping them off, or, it being behind or painful, that's all someone's experience. So changing that. And then the last piece is the communities piece, the giving back piece, which I'm super passionate about. For me, it's the thing that really gives work purpose. Making money is great, but it's not a core purpose. And if it is, it's going to be pretty empty. So I think seeing our work as a way to be able to give back, and the better we do as a company, the more we can give, has been the most rewarding part. Every year at our AGM, I show a few videos of the things we've been able to give to, and every time without fail, it, tears me up, and I'm like, okay, this obviously matters because this is why we do what we do. So yeah, that's kind of what transforming construction means to us. I don't know if that helps at all.
It does.
Yeah, it does.
Let's talk about that. These initiatives you do, and these trips you go on and you build houses. You saying that this is the year, the COVID year, 2020. You weren't able to do it, but let's talk about 2019. And you're saying that this meaningful part. Tell us what that's like.
Yeah, for sure. So I actually was invited to come to El Salvador in 2009 by a guy that was working for us at the time. I think the foundation that I was raised with my parents and the way they did things was very generous. It was always about how much can we give to those around us and how can we help people. But that experience was a game changer for me. Partly because I think we've all experienced maybe in construction, especially when you get into, more of a management or executive role, is like you're very detached from the doing of the work. And so that was like a get your hands dirty kind of experience, which is just amazing. But the initiative in El Salvador, we call it Homes in Hope, but it's partnering with an organization called Shelter. And they've been working in El Salvador since about 2007. And it's building modular steel aluminum housing. They just actually crossed the 4,000 house threshold a couple weeks ago.
Wow.
Crazy.
And it just, I can't explain it any other way than it just totally grabbed a hold of me. The first year I went a few years just on my own, and then I brought my dad at the time. And then I thought, I really want to take a team from our company so that other people can experience this. And so we've been doing that for about 8 years of taking a team, sometimes mixed with some trade partners and friends and family, to be able to build houses. It's not just the building part, because obviously we can raise the money to build houses. I think there's something about going and doing something like that changes you.
Yeah.
It gives you a whole different perspective on life and how fortunate we are. And, the people are amazing and beautiful. And so, yeah, it's been a real gift. It's been really hard this year that we didn't get to go. They've actually, what's been encouraging though is seeing how this organization has kind of risen up these leaders, these Salvadorian leaders, to kind of continue running it and leading it. And so they're going strong. And so we're still raising money for houses. Our goal is to do 20 this year, and partner with a bunch of our trade partners. And it's been cool to see some of the stories too of trying to get people engaged in this at home. Here is we had one of our superintendents put up a board in his site trailer that showed a family that we had built the house for the year before and what their house looked like and what it did now. And he'd have trades coming in. It was actually on a McDonald's project. He'd have trades coming in complaining about, digging a ditch or working out in the rain or whatever. He's like, hey, what you're doing right now is helping build this family house. So, and it gave a whole different perspective to that too. So that's El Salvador.
What's the just if somebody else wanted to do this, you're saying you raise money for each house. How does the whole financial model work? Obviously you're going to pay for your travel. You're going to get people to go there. That's all on you. Yeah. But what's the setup? How does that work?
Yeah, so we cover all the costs of going down ourselves. So and we subsidize it for our people on our team to make it kind of more accessible for them to go. But the way they're set up is a total nonprofit model. There's no Canadians or no North Americans that are getting paid by this thing. Everyone's volunteer, and so every dollar that we raise is going into either building a house or the Salvadorian cost of managing a program to build 700-800 houses now a year. So yeah, it's about $3,800 a house.
Okay.
All in, and
wow.
And so definitely gives a different perspective to what $3,800 means here. So
yeah, I don't think you can get a house in Vancouver for $3,800.
No, I don't think so.
not even a fence.
Yeah, can't get a shed for $3,800.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, and I think it aligns a lot with the story you're sharing about Novacom and the culture, and it puts action to the words a little bit too, which I'm sure you're seeing that in the people development in your group and also just the hallway conversations as well. So that's awesome to hear.
Yeah, it creates totally different kind of environment too. When you get to go with people you work with and experience something like that, it creates a really different kind of bond, than just having lunch together, right? Or going for beers after work. It's
Yeah. And
How
even
did the team.
go ahead, Christian.
I was just gonna say, how did the team feel if you were doing this on a regular basis with 2020 and not being able to go and to do something like that? Is there any like sort of like pent up like excitement about being able to go and potentially travel abroad to do something like this again? Is there a lot of chatter about it internally?
I mean, we've got a few people who have come every year who are like diehard. And then we've had, people obviously going through different life phases, right, with kids and stuff that, come once and then don't come for a couple of years and come back. But definitely the people, including me, that are used to going, 12 years in a row. It's been hard to not be able to go. So it's been cool that they've been able to build like a virtual trip. So like everything in life now, it seems to be on Zoom and Teams. But the thing that happens when we go there is it's everything condensed into like 3 days, right? So you really have to carve out 15, 20 minutes to sit down with the family and get to know their story and where they came from and what differences it's going to make in their life. But it all feels pretty rushed.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about this is they've created space to be like, we're going to meet the family, see where they live now, see the house get built, see, be able to sit down for an interview with them after they move in. And so it'll be different, and there's no such thing as, or it's not the same as being there and, seeing the sights and smelling the smells. But so looking forward to that. But yeah, definitely miss it this year for sure.
I think something that comes up in most of our episodes is when we talk about construction. A lot of the people on the podcast share like, hey, I got into this industry, or our team got into this industry to build, to transform space, whether it's, new builds, whether it's renovations. And so, but when you get caught into, especially in the Lower Mainland, there's a lot of administration, there's a lot of permitting, there's a lot of planning, there's a lot of scheduling. And then you kind of like, all of a sudden you're 3 spaces removed from actually the construction site for some people. So I'm sure you've probably had stories of your field superintendents or your project managers saying, hey, I forgot what it's like to transform, for $3,800 like a home and get that excitement and passion back.
Oh yeah, it's a super cathartic experience, right? Like especially if you're a project manager or in my seat, right, where you get to actually, be out there in 35 degrees sweating, seeing something happen and doing it alongside other people, like totally different kind of experience. And then, I mean, we're talking like this system, and they've got it dialed on that end. Like a house gets built, except for the concrete, in 3 hours, right? 3.5 hours. So you go from nothing to a new house in 3 hours. It's pretty cool experience.
That's what you guys do here in the Vancouver market, right?
That's right. Yeah. 3.5 hours. That's our typical schedule.
That's transforming construction.
Experience comes in.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's a McHouse.
Yeah.
McHouse. I like that.
3 hours.
Just don't let them know how fast you can actually put up a house, because you might have 10-week timelines on the next one.
That's true. That's the challenging part of delivering, isn't it? Every time you deliver something in 14 weeks, then they wonder how you could do it in 12.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Kind of working through our questions that we have. I know one thing we wanted to pick your brain on, and I think for people listening, they're probably asking this question a lot, is you guys do a lot of work in the interior construction space, whether that's, you said financial, so banking, and that's a retail environment, whether it's office, SAP building you talked about. I'm sure a lot of your clients are asking those questions, and you guys are in those conversations with the design teams, consultants. How are we adapting to the interior environment? Curious to hear your thoughts, perspective. I know we could have a whole podcast, probably a series of podcasts on them, but open to hearing your thoughts, and I think getting some of your perspective that you're seeing out there.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I think probably for a lot of people, the reaction right away last year was just to sort of pump the brakes and put everything on hold, right? I think there's just a lot of uncertainty of, what's the future of the office going to look like? What's retail going to look like? So it's been interesting to see that go from kind of being stopped to then clients starting to think about, what does it look like next? I mean, there's spaces for sure that have been impacted, like the restaurant space, really hit hard last year. At the same time, I think there's going to be a lot of transition there of, places changing hands and innovation. There's been a lot of innovation that's come out of, the restaurant space, right? Think of how quickly they've had to adapt to a different world. But yeah, there's definitely some industries, retail, banking, things like that are just changing, right? And there's parts of that probably aren't going to snap back to pre-COVID reality. The office side has been interesting. Just talking to some of our clients, just hearing, what their thought process has been as they're trying to figure out what that looks like for them. And I'm a firm believer that the future is hybrid. It's not, we're all going to work at home forever and never go back to an office. I just don't think that makes sense. And I think a lot of times in our culture, we kind of do the pendulum swing to one way. And then you read all the articles about, remote work is the best and everyone's more productive than they used to be. And then 6 months later, you read the counterpoint to everyone's missing culture and connection. And so I think it'll be a mix of both. What we're hearing from a bunch of our clients is that they're going to see offices more as kind of gathering hubs and social spaces than workspaces. So, it's not going to be 1,000 people and 1,000 desks. It's going to be, how are we creating places for people to meet and connect and have staff events and things like that. So, that's been the same for us too, is trying to have, you still need a home base, right? You still need a place where you call home and you have a place to meet people and bring clients and employees. It's and a place where we connect with each other. I feel like you just can never substitute the kind of connection you have in person with Teams or Zoom or anything else. Like we're missing that, right? To be around the same table or to have lunch together or have an event together.
It's funny on the one of our round tables, I think it was this week or last week, we even threw it out there. And I mean, this is good to get your opinion on it. We thought that there might even be more office spaces in the future because more people will do micro offices, and maybe where they had remote workers once upon a time, they might have little hubs.
Yeah, I could see that.
It was just,
it's crazy because pre-COVID or a couple months pre-COVID, right? You hear, even the WeWork story, right? That it's sort of the rise and fall of WeWork and co-working is dead. But then you think about it, and there's all these companies that are going to say, well, I don't necessarily want, 50,000 square feet, but I do need a space for people, and a place where people are, around other people and stuff. So, it could be. I mean, the use of the space changes how much space you need and definitely how it's set up. So I think in the office world, there's going to be a lot of change in how space is used, which is going to drive a whole, demand for construction, right? Of people looking at, okay, well, we have this 10-year lease or this 15-year lease. How are we going to use this space in the new world, right?
When you look at how communal spaces work, the newer libraries, like you'll just show up at a library, you crack open your laptop. The downtown library, they have a quiet room in there where you can't talk. It just says like no talking, period, no phones, no music, no nothing. It's interesting that people can go to a place and have their own bubble and do well, but it's still quiet and still feel. There's a whole thing about when you said the human connection. I mean, we only see and using our senses that we have that we can actually, figure out this going on. And like, I'm seeing the screen right now. I can hear some stuff. I can taste my drink a little bit. I can smell a few things. But these are only the senses that we're all talking about, the main things. There's this probably other energy field thing going on where you don't feel like when you're not around people, you don't have that, right? So it's probably, so we've been feeling not human for a year now. So when you talk about the hubs, I think it's going to be a really neat thing to be able to look at what other setups have been going in the past that have been doing it for a long time, modeling some of those things. It is all about the consistency of the chair. No matter what chair you sit in, it's going to feel the same.
Yeah.
Cleaning is definitely going to be a new business. Like in between, like you need like daily cleaners between people in stations, right? Because that's going to be a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's going to be are you seeing?
Yeah, and figuring out, like we were talking about before we started here, is just figuring out how to reintegrate, to the office and to sort of come back in a hybrid way is its own, kind of challenge, right? How do we do that in the right way? How do we, navigate how everyone experiences it and, what's still going on and find the right balance there. That's definitely a challenge. I think that probably every business is feeling right now.
So you've had the privy of, you go on your website, you look at all some of the big, tech brands. Tech brands are, renowned for having, from Google or Apple having these great corporate environments, having, ping pong tables is, is like a standard. It's like the minimum requirement to crazy kind of things. Tell us some of you don't have to say what brands, obviously, but if you could just tell us some of the crazy things you've seen in some of these to attract people to come and be together.
Yeah. Well, yeah, without naming names, I think seeing companies that have a full-blown arcade, in their office, and a music studio, and meals, 3 meals a day. You're thinking about that, and you're thinking, I think there's probably people that work here that live in a 400 square foot condo that are pretty anxious to get back to the office.
Yeah.
I think they're missing breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and a place to record their next album. So
nice.
I think that's a big part of it too. Is like we make this assumption. I mean, you see the trend in real estate that a lot of people didn't really see coming, right? Of the migration to the suburbs of, we want more space, right? But for anyone who's still in the city or who wants to be in the city, they're going to want to go back to the office, right? Like they're not real keen to work at their kitchen table for another 10 years.
Mm-hmm. What is what point is, like, if you were to pay for your employees, their transit, for instance, to come to and from office, that's like a, what do you call it? It's a benefit, right? Like CRA considers that a taxable benefit.
Yeah.
So if you're paying for all their meals, let's say you pay for their dry cleaning, let's say you paid for all this, like at what point are they going to step in and go, hey, like working here, this is all pre-tax stuff.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I don't know how that works.
I know.
It's got to be a big number though.
It must be like 3 meals a day. Like that's.
But I have
$100.
heard, in talking to some of our clients, them say like those things are the big recruiting differentiators, right?
Yeah, totally.
So if you take those away, now obviously, being able to have regional freedom and be able to travel and still work and stuff is its own kind of freedom. But for a lot of them, it's like if you're in an urban place, it's like what kind of work environment is there, right?
Yeah.
That compels me to come work here.
Yeah.
Right. And so you take that away and everyone's at home and that kind of disappears, right? So I think that's still going to be there as a way to compete for talent.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Post-COVID.
And we talk about offices creating that culture component in those conversations. Like you have your 9 to 5 and you're working on your task, but if it's that ping pong table, if you're sharing that lunch with someone, you get to know their story, what makes them click. When you have that tough project or the tough timeline, you have some rapport there you can lean on. And so, even for us, when we do lunches, like it pulls everyone together. People were going to take that hour themselves and go wherever they wanted to go. And now they're spending, 45, 50 minutes of really good conversations. So, I think that's the thing people are wrestling with is returning to office. How do we replace that culture?
Yeah. And with some people, we were just talking about this the other day that, we looked at it as seeing that our culture tank was pretty full, coming into COVID because we were doing all those things. Right. And we have that space and we were putting the effort into doing events. And so it's continued on. I mean, I think people have missed it a lot. We just did an engagement survey about a month ago and got the highest score that we'd ever had from our team. And that was surprising. But I think it spoke to the fact that people still feel really connected and engaged and as part of a team. But that is because we started, with all those things in place. And I think companies that didn't, who weren't already doing those things are now kind of scrambling to say, okay, well, what do we do now when we don't have everyone here in the office?
For sure. Like it definitely makes a huge difference, especially you were sharing before that you had built these pillars and you'd done all these things to, discover, you talked about the why and all that kind of stuff. But I think companies that had a really strong culture pre-COVID were able to thrive through COVID because it helps you communicate better if you had to be remote for a time or if you had to be apart from each other or whatever it happens to be. So I think that was a big thing. And definitely, just because even on our end, we had to figure out a couple things. We didn't have all of our all the dots connected before COVID hit, and so we had to scramble a little bit. Right, some parts were strong, but if you're super intentional about it, we were able to bring some things together. But I think that will be a part that will really drive people back to a physical space where they can collaborate again.
For sure.
And I think we've seen this, and I think in our past couple of episodes talked about it, is employees that have worked, let's say for Novacom for years, have built a bit of, culture and rapport. And then when you go to remote, it's pretty easy to maintain that. I'm not sure how many people you've hired during COVID, but they haven't been able to go in the office. And I mean, for our staff, we've hired people that in 2020. And so they're learning culture differently. So I think that's an interesting question, but
yeah, we've had the same. We've had 4 or 5 people join us this year, and they've integrated really well. But I've thought about that as like, you didn't have the advantage of all of this, baseline to work off of, right? You came in here, we had someone start, like 2 or 3 weeks in, right? As full remote, no office. And it's a really interesting way to integrate into a company, right?
yeah. And probably for a lot of companies, it's going to be, how do you do digital onboarding? How do you do that culture and how do you create that space? Christian kind of mentioned this, but, and we talked about it probably before we started recording, but you guys were pretty progressive in the technology and the collaboration tools that you guys use. How did you guys find adapting to kind of COVID construction, and what tools, what processes have you guys used? Not to give away your secret sauce, but maybe to share some insights and how you guys adapted, because it seems to have gone as best possible, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think it starts with the fact that I'm probably a bit of a geek at heart, that anytime I have an excuse to try out a new gadget or piece of software, I'll take it. But we've tried to push that stuff well before COVID became a thing. So whether it was like having all of our infrastructure in the cloud to, having people set up so they could work exactly the same remote as they could in the office. I think that transition, that part of it was pretty seamless, to be honest, in how we were set up to work. I think the team really adapted well. I'm trying to think of some of the technology things. I mean, we were living in Microsoft Teams, 4 years ago, right? So it's not like it was like a new thing that we're like, okay, now we got to implement this and figure out how we're going to work with it. It's just we were used to it already. The one that we have rolled out this year that's been really interesting and fun has been Matterport for 3D scanning and capturing sites and stuff. And there's been all kinds of use cases for that that have come up, whether it's, creating ways to do site visits for trades, right? When you can't have everyone in a tight space, to, giving an owner, who's in Ontario or back east somewhere, a way to tour a site, right, without traveling out here. That's had a lot of applications, and that's been really cool. We're just starting a pilot program now with Microsoft HoloLens and doing kind of virtual site tours, not just the BIM piece of being able to see a model in the space, but to be able to have a superintendent, walk you through the site when you can't be there physically. I think the balance is, for a guy who just loves technology, is that technology is going to change some of these things forever. There will never be like a replacement for being in the same place. But I think we were watching a talk the other day, Simon Sinek on YouTube, just talking about there is no going back to normal. And it was this idea that there's probably some people that have gone the last year just thinking like, I'll just wait a few more months and it'll kind of snap back. And then there's people who have thought, there's elements here that are just always going to be different now, right? And thinking about those. So like for us, I think it's just, the reality of travel. We've been across Western Canada and done work from here to Manitoba for the last 10 years. And, you're flying into town to do a site visit for an hour, and it's, taking a day and a half and thousands of dollars, right? So you might still do that, but you might not do it every week or every 2 weeks, right? You're going to find ways to bridge that. And the same with clients, right? They're not going to be coming out to visit site weekly. They're going to, ask us to map the space or to do, tours or to grab the consultant team and be looking at an issue, remotely and trying to solve it, right? So I think we're really focused on that, of what things are going to help us, post-COVID too, with technology.
It's funny you mentioned that about when you're doing projects in a different city. It almost becomes like, because our meeting rhythm has dictated it, we need to fly somewhere or we need to go somewhere. It's our weekly meeting. Yeah. Like back in my PM days, I would do projects in Alberta and I would go out there, and not to say that it's good to build relationships, see somebody face to face, but there were definitely times when you get to your project, you're like, well, nothing really changed that I couldn't see from a photo, or that I couldn't have solved through a phone call. And so you're bang on. I mean, you build efficiencies through times like these. So
think it's forced us to see which things are more essential and which ones aren't, right? So
Yeah, totally.
as a business owner, you can look at the fact and say, wow, we saved a lot of money last year because we didn't have in-person meetings, we didn't, go for lunches and things like that. Like, well, that's not the answer, right? Like, those things were valuable. It's just that we're going to look at them a bit differently going forward, probably, and ask which ones really were the most valuable.
And I'm going to be curious to see, as you mentioned, all the tools and processes that Novacom has. I'm trying to think about maybe some other builders or CMs that weren't as progressive before COVID and they've been slower to adapt. I'm assuming there's going to be a wider and wider gap between how you guys build versus kind of the legacy firms. And so I think COVID's probably accelerated that gap, and you're going to be able to attract talent that wants to work in that environment, not going to want to go back. So I'm going to be curious to see how it like lays out the different builders in the marketplace. Certain clients are going to expect that, certain clients won't. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I'm not sure if you have any ideas to that, but
yeah, it will be interesting. I think part of it though is do you have the kind of team who is, growth mindset, is there a better way kind of team? Or do you have like a, a bit more fixed mindset, this is how we do things kind of team?
yeah.
Right. I think because I've always pushed the envelope with our team, sometimes to a fault, of trying new things or doing something different. We just have a team that's very used to that, right? So when it's like, hey, we're rolling out this new thing, people are like, all right, let's learn it, let's do it. And I don't know that culture exists in every company, right? Of people who are willing to try anything or learn new things, or right. Yeah, so I think that's probably a big part of it. But I think you're right.
Is part of the draw, obviously you have your culture side of things, your, how you do things, that's that part of it, team size, blah, blah, blah. There's also the caliber of projects element that, as far as I know anyway, in Vancouver is and in BC is a difficult thing in terms of getting the big projects because of the point system. Like, do you know much about that point system that's like, for instance, to be able to get a post office, for instance, you have to have a certain amount of those types of projects and even to even get into the bidding. So like, that's, to me, does that seem broken? Like, what is that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a bit of the whole RFP game, I guess. I just had a workshop a week ago that was all about sales and storytelling and breaking through that. It was interesting because he talked about how the idea of an RFP process is that you could remove all emotion from a purchasing decision and just make it totally objective.
Okay, yeah.
And that's kind of a farce, right? Like the idea that you can boil everything down to just a few numbers. And but I think that's for sure an obstacle that, it's well, if you haven't done 5 of these, then you can't do this one, right?
Yeah.
And as we're growing, I think what you need to find along the way is clients who, you've built a rapport with on a $4 million project, who then trust you and say, you know what, we'd rather actually work with you guys on this $10 million project than, these other guys, right? And that's been something I think as we've grown, that you always have to convince someone that you can do something that you haven't done before. Otherwise, no company would grow.
Yeah.
Everyone would just be building the same things forever, right? So that's a bit of I think a storytelling piece. It's a bit of a bringing the right experience onto your team piece, which I've been really focused on, is how do we bring over some, key people from competitors or people who are thriving in that space, so that even if I can't say that, Novacom has 10 of those projects on a resume, I've got a team of people who, do have those projects on their resume.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Good point. Good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great point.
Great point. Anyone else?
Incredible point.
Fantastic. Absolutely smashing point.
I guess kind of looking at the time, just kind of closing the conversation out a little bit, would be, it's weird to say 2021 because we've started it. I mean, it's March now. We're already in the middle of March, which is crazy. But what are you excited for kind of 2021? You guys, have got momentum. You got a good team. You've kind of decided how to work remotely, et cetera, et cetera. What gets you excited? What gets you fired up?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing, we're talking about how today is a brighter day outside. I think just the fact that it's spring and maybe we're heading towards a bit of light at the end of the COVID tunnel where days are going to get better, I think is encouraging. We've got some pretty exciting projects that we're working on and starting. We're just starting a rec center in North Vancouver at Lionsgate Rec Center. Just started this week. So excited about that one. Starting a really big biotech lab office project at Main Alley in Vancouver.
Cool.
Yeah.
Fraserland's church, big church expansion in Vancouver, our first tower crane. So that was a pretty cool milestone. So lots of fun stuff happening on the project side. I think is, something that we're excited about in 2021. Adding a few more key people to our team. I've just added one awesome guy who I can't share yet, but in a couple months will come to light. So very, very excited about that and how that's going to help us grow. And then, trying to find a couple of other key people who are going to help us, kind of move into this new world is probably the thing I'm most excited about for this year.
Cool. We didn't know that Mike's Homes on Homes was available for a job, so that's kind of cool that you're getting that guy. Trying to think who the notable construction celebrity is. I'm just racking my brains. So what is your head count now in terms of the company? How many people you got?
Yeah, we're at about 40 people right now.
Cool. That's a sizable payroll. It's cool. Nice.
Yeah. You really realize the sizable payroll during COVID, don't you?
You do. Yeah. You're like, what, every 2 weeks?
They go straight to that, hey?
Yeah.
No, probably we'll be adding between 5 and 8 people this year.
Yes.
So, my sister Sherelle, as I mentioned, is our director of people and culture, and she's awesome. And so that's kind of a fun part of us leading alongside each other is, trying to find the best people and tell the Novacom story and why this is a great place for them to build their careers. And so it's a challenge, but it's fun too.
So in terms of her professional development, did she have an HR background before? Or she just learned by osmosis, taken like
the dinner table?
Yeah. How is that? That's a pretty cool role.
She came out of teaching, as I mentioned before. She started as a teacher and she did that for a few years and then came back in. So I think her training on that side has made her really good at training and learning side, but she's been just always passionate about people. So that's say it's her beating heart, right? So I think we complement each other really well. I'm tend to be the numbers focused projection technology guy, and she's sometimes reminding me of the softer side of things that I don't always see right at first glance. So yeah, it's been really fun leading alongside her.
It's awesome. Fun when you can build something and like you're getting excited even about your next hires, that you know the specific role and the strengths that are going to be required, and when you get those people slotted in there.
Well, and when you start to know who you are and what your culture is, we can tell in the first 5 minutes of when we met someone if they're like, we got to sort out the technical stuff, but are you someone who we could see on our team? And if not, I don't care if you have all the qualifications in the world, like we're not going to compromise on that. And I think there's times where that's, it's slowed down growth, which is fine, because for us, it's just not worth compromising on that. We want to, there's tons of different personalities on our team and different ways of coming at it, but some universal values. The biggest one I would say that we talk about a lot, which maybe isn't talked about a lot in our industry, is humility, right? Is someone teachable? Are they willing to receive feedback, or do they think they're the best thing that's ever happened to construction, right? Because if we come at it from that perspective, we say to clients even, we don't have it all figured out, right? We're conductors of the orchestra, right? We're bringing together, great trade partners, but we're going to admit when we make mistakes. We'll actually offer them and say, this is what we learned here, and here's how we're going to do it better next time. And so I think looking for that in our team is a big thing, big characteristic that matters a lot to us.
And I think when you guys are as bold as you are in throwing out lines like transforming construction and people and all that, you're going to attract people that can hear that and get excited about it. And you can also push people away that are going to say, well, that's a little soft for me. And those probably aren't the people that are going to, number one, transform construction, but be a fit. And
for sure.
And I think that's what's great to see. So excited to watch continued growth and to find out who the new recruit is.
Yeah, and it's having conversations like this where you can like share it, that people can be able to hear it, and that could be one of your next 8 hires, right?
Well, it actually is one of our hires this year, because we have people tell us all the time, and it hurts every time someone says, "You guys are the best kept secret in Vancouver." I'm like, that's not a good, that's not a good label to have.
Yeah,
we should probably tell more people about ourselves.
Yeah, you definitely have to. It's a great story, and man, I feel like we could unpack so many things here. And like we often do with our guests, we do round twos. So I think this is something where we're going to have to
Next year. It'll take a whole year to get them back
Oh,
on.
we could do it sooner than a year. I'd love that.
Well, we got to get you on like a round table because it's fun. It's like more casual. Once we've unpacked Brandon's story, we can get into like a specific topic and stuff like that, which would be really fun. But it'd just be good to just track your story because I feel like there's so much ahead for you guys, even though you've had such an action-packed 30 years.
For sure.
Andrew, anything else to bring in here?
No, I love that summary. I mean, I think it was awesome hearing your story. Worth the wait. I would say that definitely worth the wait. So yeah, it's really obvious you care. The team cares. You guys, want to do great work. And I think hearing stories like you guys, the best kept secret, is great to see and hear. And I think our podcast is really focused on telling the good stories of construction and celebrating that it's a great industry. There's good work. There's good people in it. And so getting your story, hearing about your focus on transforming construction is great. And I think will align with a lot of our listeners. So I'm excited. And I'm also excited for the potential rapid fire.
It's not potential. It's happening.
Which we didn't prep Brandon on. So
don't worry. Everything you've been sharing, it's right in line with this. You'll have these answers nailed down, but this is a great piece that you can even take. We can use sound bites from this. And it's just a great way for people to learn more about Brandon and more about Novacom. So,
sounds good.
Without further ado, Brandon, we're going to go deep right away.
All right.
What inspires you?
What inspires me? I think making people's lives better. I think if I go one layer beneath the technology thing, I think the thing that fires me up about it is if there's a way that a piece of technology or software or a way of doing things will free up more time to spend with our families or do other things we're passionate about, then I'm all about that. So yeah, I think anything that makes people's lives better and easier.
Love it. Yeah. Best book or podcast that you've listened to, let's say in the pandemic year?
Oh, I mean, podcast is a tough toss up between Guy Raz, How I Built This.
Nice.
That's probably the favorite. I've listened to every episode, and Tim Ferriss. Those are my two go-tos. Yeah.
Nice. That's awesome. Here's a fun one. What's something that you believe in that other people would think is insane?
Ooh.
Or maybe something you do.
Something I do or believe in. Well, I think my faith, I think is something, as a Christian, is not something that everyone believes in, but something that I'm passionate about and is a part of who I am and how I live my life. And underneath transforming construction, all that is a huge part of who I am and who we are as Novacom, is about trying to live that out in the workplace. So, yeah.
That's cool. That's awesome. What is the most important piece of your background? Now you've been with Novacom
since you were 5.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what did you learn while you were playing in preschool that contributes to your success at Novacom? So the most important piece of your background.
Probably work ethic. I think, it's easy to think that the narrative or the story of coming into a family business is sort of this, son or kids got handed the keys and, that side of things. And I think the reality is my parents always expected us to work really hard and made us work really hard. And so we didn't kind of get the easy road. So I think learning how to persevere and persist through things, even when they sucked and were hard, is probably a big part of it. Especially in years like this last year where you just have some days really, this is tough, right? But your job as the leader is to kind of get up and be the one that has a smile on and says, we're going to see the other side of this thing. So I'd say that probably.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'd say grit is pretty key in work ethic when you're building a successful construction company.
Yeah, for sure.
What's the most challenging part about owning a construction business or being in construction?
I would say it's probably holding both the idealism and future that we would like to see in our industry with the reality of what parts of it are right now. I'd say that's probably the hardest thing, is that it's fun to get together as a leadership team or with others in the industry and talk about, partnership, and to talk about alignment and transparency, and this sort of blue sky, blue ocean, beautiful future looks like. And know that it's never going to fully happen. It's kind of the transforming construction thing, right? It's like you probably don't have the right mission if you can accomplish it in your lifetime or ever.
Yep.
So it's kind of holding, I think, what we hope it can be to what it is right now, and living in the reality of trying to just chip away at it and make it better, month by month and year by year.
Love it. Okay. We're called The Site Visit. We're a construction podcast all about leadership in construction with perspective from the job site. I think we've got a lot of the leadership in construction part down. We want to know, what is the best story or most memorable thing that you have from the job site?
Ooh. I mean, I just got to go with the first one that comes up, I guess, right?
Let's do it.
So we're going back to childhood. So I had, as I mentioned, I was doing demolition on sites at a young age, and so we'd be going on the weekends to demo tile in a bank on the weekend. And we had this French Canadian gentleman working for us named Etienne, and we would drive around in his milk van between sites to do demo, and he loved his job so much that he ended up getting a tattoo on his shoulder of himself with the Hilti logo. So that's probably my favorite. And then he would drive around in the van, and he'd be wearing his hard hat the whole time, and I'd be like, "Why are you wearing your hard hat in the van?" Listening to AC/DC and Guns N' Roses, and he'd say, "The ladies like the hard hat." So, there you go. Maybe that's not what you're looking for, but there's my construction memory.
You know what? 9 times out of 10, people respond, and I feel like the whole podcast has been, pretty dialed in terms of, like I said, the leadership stuff. But I think like 9 times out of 10, people share like it was a great lesson learned, or it was a very, it was a inspiring moment. But that's exactly what we're going for. That's a great construction story.
I like it.
That's perfect, Brandon. Okay. Well, Brandon, is there anything that you would want to share with any potential new hires, potential partners, people that you might be working with in the future, that you would want to just say, last little thing here to the audience, to leave them with?
Yeah, I think just people, hearing a bit about my story and our stories, I think we're constantly looking for people to join our team who, where that sort of lights them up and inspires them. And so if that's you, then give me a call. And the same on the client side. I think Andrew said it is, when you put yourself out there and you say, here's who we are, you tend to attract people who are like you are. Mm-hmm. And so I hope that's the case for clients too, and people that we can partner with. We're about long-term relationships and not one project at a time. So yeah, excited for 2021 and the future, and seeing this thing continue to grow. So thank you guys for having me. This has been really fun.
Absolutely. Well said, Brandon. We look forward to doing this again. Andrew?
I was thinking, I actually forgot my line. What am I supposed to say? It's been a long day. Oh, I know what it is now. I know what it is.
Andrew?
Let's get back to building.
Thanks for listening to The Site Visit, a podcast dedicated to leadership in construction with perspective from the job site. If you like the show, please subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or Google Play. To learn more, check us out online at theSiteVisit.com.